Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. I'm Vittorio Campanile. With me, Alex McKenzie. Football is back, Alex. Still, we didn't see Lazio playing, but at least we saw other Italian team playing, and this is a huge step forward compared to last week, right? It wasn't the best match we ever saw, but at least football is back, Calcio is back, and next week Lazio finally will play again.
Yeah, I can't wait. I mean, it was really exciting to finally have some Italian football to watch again. But yeah, then it does make it a little bit more frustrating from a Lazio perspective that we still have so long to wait until we get a chance. But yeah, it's almost just a little over a week now until Lazio's first game, and a few other games obviously between now and then. And yeah, I thought it was really interesting getting the first sight, I suppose, of what Calcio looks like now. After so long off, we've speculated so much in the last couple of podcasts about what it might look like, what effects it might have. And I suppose now we've got the first kind of small, at least, ideas.
Before talking about Lazio and all the news about training, I know you want to talk about Bastos as usual.
As always.
Let's go back and talk about the Coppa Italia, because obviously it was very interesting from a Lazio point of view, because we had Juventus playing, Inter playing, and it was even curious to see Milan and Napoli playing. I wasn't impressed, I have to be honest. We said in this month or so without football that Juventus would be favorite because they have a bigger roster, they have a lot of players to pick, playing every 3 days, Lazio will struggle, etc. But we saw Juventus playing against Milan, and Milan played, what was it, 80 minutes, one man down. Juventus had missed even a penalty. It wasn't the Juventus I was expecting. I thought it was average at best. So,
yeah, I know. Yeah, it was strange, that game, because I thought Juventus actually started quite well and almost played better when they were up against 11 men than they did when they were against 10 men. But that game was, I found, to be a real disappointment, because yes, it was great to have a game to watch again. It was great to see familiar players again and kind of get quite into it and focus in on a match. But yeah, I think I just hoped that there'd be a bit more of a spectacle. I mean, obviously a 0-0 draw is never a great spectacle unless it's something special. But in this game, all the action really happened in the course of 1 minute, which is Ronaldo missing his penalty, and then Ante Rebic deciding to do some sort of UFC kung fu kick to get himself sent off, which was quite spectacular. But yeah, I mean, it was more kind of what happened from then on that disappointed me. Up until that point, I was quite engaged in the game. But yeah, there were a few chances, and I thought Donnarumma made some good saves. But I thought just generally the pace of the game was quite slow. The quality of football wasn't quite what I expected it to be, and I don't think we should necessarily make too many judgments on this, because it's just the first game back and there's going to be rustiness and so on. But it is perhaps a signal of what we can expect from the other teams when we come back, that they are maybe going to need a couple of games to get into it again.
yeah, obviously you made the right point that we have to see what happened to Lazio. But my two biggest takeaway of that match, thinking about Juventus, is one, without Higuain, they don't really have a real number 9. Cristiano Ronaldo and Dybala likes to move around, but the biggest difference compared to, for example, Ciro Immobile, that likes to move around, Ciro Immobile is good to get in the penalty box, create chances, and be dangerous from there. We saw both Cristiano Ronaldo and Dybala moving a lot away from the penalty box, and without Higuain, Juventus had a lot of ball possession, but Donnarumma made a couple of good saves, nothing special. In 90 minutes, one man down, you only create 2 chances. That's ridiculous. Yeah. And the second point, Alistair, is when Sarri made those 3 substitutions in the second half, taking off Pjanic, etc., we saw Bernardeschi, terrible player. Rabiot, joke.
Even worse.
The quality of the midfield of Juventus is ridiculous. I really have the impression that they wasted money on players that are not that level, are pumped up like, the press say Rabiot, it's a genius. He's not. So these are my two biggest takeaway of that match, talking about Juventus, obviously.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, the depth of Juve's squad was one of the things we focused on the most, I think, when we discussed this previously, and how scary that is, at least on paper, compared to Lazio's. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Again, I think perhaps it's too soon to say. But I think the midfield is an interesting point, because what struck me in that game, what you said about the forward line, I think is spot on. When you don't have that focal point, it does make it a bit more difficult to get used to. I mean, Gazzetta, I saw there, had one of the most great, like, overly reactive hot takes the next day, where they said Ronaldo, they were kind of having a massive go at Ronaldo's performance, and said it was like Ronaldo being the most famous person in the world without having a crowd to play for is like when Samson has his hair cut off. I thought that's a bit too far probably from one game, but yeah, I don't think he's the same player through the middle. But what struck me is they just don't really have those midfield players who break forward to support the strikers. They have a lot of guys who can move the ball around nicely, like Rabiot and Bentancur and Pjanic and so on, but they're not really guys who break forward into the box to get on the end of chances. I think Aaron Ramsey can be that kind of player for them, but he's not. I don't think he's fully fit yet. So, yeah, I mean, like I say, I think with this Juve team, the strange thing is they've not actually really impressed us all that much throughout the entire season, but here they are, and they're on top of the league. They're in the Champions League last 16, and now they're in the Coppa Italia final. So it doesn't really matter, I suppose, from their perspective, because they keep failing to impress people, I suppose, from the expectations that we have, but at the same time, they keep getting what they want and getting the results. So for that reason, you can't really criticize them too much.
No, obviously you cannot criticize them too much, but I think on the other side, I mean, is it the worst AC Milan we ever saw this year? Without Ibrahimovic, they were terrible. Without Rebic, they really didn't create that match. I thought, who was it? Calabria was awful. You have so many players of Milan to pick up, and same thing in the Campionato. You can say that Juventus played well against Inter both matches, but didn't show that talent that they should have. How often did Cristiano Ronaldo save the day for Juventus? I think often. So I'm not saying it's done. Lazio will win the Scudetto, but we were all talking about, wow, Juventus will be a big favorite now, etc. Well, maybe it looks to me, Alistair, that the same problem they had before the break are still there. Exactly. Both Juventus and Inter, when we are going to talk about Inter, they're the same team. I expected, something different.
Well, I think this is actually quite a good point to move on to Inter, because I thought that was a really interesting game to watch. Again, it's worth always remembering that, yes, Juve and Napoli are the two kind of winners from this round, but neither of them won. The two games ended in draws, if we look at it just from a complete 90-minute perspective. I thought Inter really struggled from the fact that their two strikers, Lukaku and Martinez, didn't really show up, and they did more than enough to win that game. They dominated a lot of it. I know that Gattuso kind of likes to set up his Napoli side to counter-attack and to defend well, and they did defend very well, and David Ospina had probably the best game I've ever seen him have, apart from the opening 5 minutes. But yeah, I mean, that Inter team, the thing that struck me was that I think I noticed it a little bit more there than with Juventus, kind of the diversity of options they've got off the bench, because Martinez wasn't playing well when he came off. Alexis Sanchez came on, and this is a guy you can almost forget about by now because of how little impact he's had at Inter this season. But he looked really sharp, and that's a reminder of the kind of player he can be and the kind of quality he does possess. And that kind of player coming off their bench, they also had, the likes of Stefano Sensi. They changed their wing backs. I think that's the weakness area for them anyway, and to be honest. But yeah, they also have a deep squad, and I think we saw that during that game from the amount of changes that Conte made.
But going to Inter, the biggest problem they had in the past, well, before the break, was that Lukaku never scores against big team, and if Lautaro Martinez doesn't score, they really struggle. Against Napoli, as you mentioned, they score because Napoli defense made a terrible mistake. So this is one of the problems. The other problem that it's in a certain way scary for Inter is that usually if you're playing in a Conte team, you're very well organized defensively and you don't allow stupid goals. This is not the first time that Inter allows stupid goals. A counter-attack goal when you're winning 1-0 away, it doesn't make sense. And it was far too easy for Napoli to score. So, again, we know the talent of Inter. Inter has probably in the midfield more options than Juventus. But they have quite clear weaknesses. So, again, people were saying, Conte, when Conte restarts the season, the Conte's teams are always very fast at the beginning. They always perform incredibly well at the beginning of the season. They will do the same at the restart. No, they didn't. So, again.
Yeah, I thought the one thing that stood out for me was that Christian Eriksen looked a lot better than he has done as well. And I think he's exactly the kind of player who's going to benefit from having had a bit more time to settle into the club and understand his role better and what's expected of him. I thought he was probably their best player on the night. He's a fantastic signing, and again, like Alexis Sanchez, is one who was almost quite easy to forget about because he hadn't quite managed to make an impact yet at the club. So I'm still a bit concerned about Inter, to be honest. I think that they can kind of do something at the end of the season, and I don't know. I mean, I know they've got more games, but now they are out of this tournament, so that takes one at least off, and I do kind of feel a little bit more now, having watched these games and seen how rusty some of the teams are. I'm feeling a little bit more like the teams who kind of get games in earlier might benefit when the full rounds of Serie A start again. So by the time it gets round to Lazio playing that week 27, I think it is, kicking off in full, you'll obviously have teams like Inter and Juve and Napoli having already played games, but we'll also have Atalanta who are playing Lazio. They'll already have kind of made some sort of conclusions about their opening game before they even take on Lazio. So that's, I think, probably more of a disadvantage than an advantage now, despite the quick turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, playing a match, it's an advantage because you get a little bit used to playing, but on the other side, you don't have that much time for recovering. And let's not forget that Wednesday, there's the Coppa Italia final. Both teams wants to win, so for Juventus, it is an extra effort that obviously will count, especially considering Cristiano Ronaldo is playing for sure. Dybala is going to start. So, those two will play 3 matches probably in 1 week. That's not an easy task, especially considering that they haven't been played for, 2 months, something like that. So, it's going to make the difference. And on the other side, I don't want to say it's going to be easy for Lazio. Those two teams, Juventus and Inter, are still quite dangerous. But reading the newspaper, looking around, everybody was convinced that, Juventus and Inter will start very well, while Lazio, was playing great football before. Now, when they will restart, won't be playing that well. I'm not sure about that. Seeing Juventus and Inter, I can see that they can struggle and continue to play poorly like they did before the football stops.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll only have time to see. I mean, I do feel a little bit worried about our start compared to the other teams. I mean, I think Lazio's kind of opening fixtures are harder than what the other two teams have up against, what they have to come up against. I mean, Atalanta away is obviously a difficult one, but then just 3 days after that, Fiorentina. I think that's a really interesting opponent, because I think it was Arrigo Sacchi who said recently that he thinks they might be the team who almost have the strongest end to the season because they're the youngest. And that's quite a simplistic way, I suppose, of looking at it. But the younger the team, the more energy is a fairly basic algorithm. And yeah, I mean, you can see where he's coming from. And yeah, that Fiorentina team has disappointed this season, but there are a lot of good players in it. So I think that's tricky. It's a tricky start, but then again, if Lazio are able to get good results against difficult opponents early on, that momentum that we were talking about last week will immediately return. So yeah, you can look at it both ways, I suppose.
Are you trying to put the word algorithm in every podcast now?
I'm doing my best in every sentence, to be honest.
Yeah, honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that Saki was so simplistic. Even because, yeah, they're younger, but they don't have the experience to cope with playing every 3 days. You need experience to know how to recover, because even if you're young, that doesn't mean that you can play every 3 days, etc. And they're not babies, they're not 12 years old that they run 24 hours a day. So they need to rest as well. Plus, they have Ribéry, that is probably not the youngest player in Serie A. Said this, I think Delio Rossi today said, the match against Atalanta is going to be the key for Lazio season. If they lose that match, Scudetto race is over. If they win, it sends a huge message to Juventus. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, I mean, both matches against Atalanta, you should say. I mean, it's already been talked about a lot, but the game earlier on this season, 3-0 down at halftime and coming back to draw 3-0, the club, the players and Inzaghi have both spoken openly about the fact that was the turning point of their entire season and where everything changed. So yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't know. I don't know if it's crucial enough to say it's the decisive point when, let's be honest, if we're fighting for the Scudetto this season, the game against Juventus is probably going to be more important. But yeah, I mean, I can get on board with that train of thought, because I think it's really fundamental to start well. And to be honest, even a draw and a good performance isn't necessarily a bad result here to go up there against as good a team as Atalanta and do that. But given this team is now, 21 games unbeaten, I think that it would put a real dampener on things to immediately lose that winning run. Sorry, not winning run, the unbeaten run as soon as we restart. And you know exactly what would happen in the media coverage of Lazio. It would immediately become incredibly critical and point out all the flaws in the team and aim to kind of destabilise the mood in the camp. I think that the mood in the camp is probably one of the best aspects of this team, and I don't think that will be destabilised too easy. But yeah, I think it maybe not the most fundamental game of the season, but one of them certainly. Yeah.
Talking about the camp, did you see the video of Milinkovic-Savic today?
No, I haven't.
Oh, guys, if you're listening to this podcast, I think it's still there on Instagram. It's unbelievable. He he did all the things with the Avengers, like Endgame. So it's great. It really pumps you up, and it's funny because
God, it sounds like your kind of dream, something that you've made up.
Yeah, so it ties very well with our T-shirt Laziali Assemble. So it's perfect. I should call Sergej. But yeah, with all the rumors saying that Milinkovic-Savic wants to leave Lazio and he posts this type of videos, it's really proved how many people are writing stupid things. So yeah, I give Alice the chance to watch it now. It's crazy you didn't see it. I mean, it was shared on everywhere on social, so it's great.
Yeah, I've not had the most active of days, to be honest with you. Yeah, well, speaking of things that have been happening and Instagram stars, Bastos is a man I want to address immediately, if you don't mind. Because I mean,
Instagram.
Well, this is the great disappointment I was going to say, was that it didn't turn up on Instagram. But Bastos went on an individual run where he slalomed past 4 defenders and then beat Strakosha to score. And you can see some pictures of him and his celebration, and it's one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever seen. So if ever evidence was needed that this man is in the wrong position, we've got even more now. I mean, I should be compiling all of this, to be honest. But if he's doing this in training now and we're getting 5 substitutes and we don't have many strikers in this team, I tell you, Inzaghi's going to be thinking about it. He's going to be thinking about it.
Yeah, well, write to Simone, right? Say, hey, what do you think about Basso's strike Vice Immobile?
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, I mean that for me was the most exciting thing I think that's happened since we last spoke. But
okay, guys, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. We're gonna talk again next Monday. Seriously, there have been some comebacks important. I know you want to talk about other players, but Lukaku is back.
Yep.
There was a picture of him yesterday at the Padella. Now I don't know if he will be ever able to come back and play again, but he's back.
He is back. I know it was somewhat surprising. I'm always surprised, to be honest, when you see Lukaku kind of around, because it seems like it's so rare. We did get a question about this on the left wing backs from Alexander Mikkelsen, just asking us whether we'd like Johnny, Maricic, or if he's fit, Lukaku as left wing back. Obviously, because Senad Lulic is still injured at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that question, Vittorio, is kind of dependent on fitness, isn't it? I cannot see Lukaku being fit enough to start anytime soon. And Maricic as well, we have to wait and see. I mean, I think he was only back in training today. So his condition's going to have to be monitored. Then so it kind of has to be Johnny, to be honest, at the moment. I think, to be honest, if everyone's fit, I still quite like the idea of having Adam Maricic on the left-hand side, just because I think, I can't quite believe I'm saying this, considering the things we said about him a couple of years ago, but I do think he's more defensively sound than Johnny. I don't know if that's a bigger compliment to Maricic or an insult to Johnny, but it did seem like quite an interesting move that Inzaghi started to make before the suspension, and did seem to be working a little bit as well. So he would be my pick, I think, if it was between the three of them and they're all fit.
Well, it looks like Maruzic already trained on the other side last week. So it looks like Inzaghi's testing him, because last week Johnny wasn't available. So, but considering the 5 subs, if Lukaku is not 100% fit, but let's say he's able to play 20, 30, 35 minutes, that could be a plan, He can enter in the second half, and, even if he can play only 25 minutes, but if you get 25 minutes of Lukaku at top at the end of the match when the other team is fatigued, then, he can be a game changer. And a little bit like basketball, right? You make those substitution that plays a little chunk of match, and Lukaku can be really decisive at the end of the match. I think, well, we have to see who is fit between Johnny and Maruzic. And let's not forget Falbo, that he's in the first squad now. He's able to play all the position there. So obviously I'm not saying he's going to start, but thinking about the 5 subs, he can come in eventually in every type of match, depending on the situation, I think.
And he gave an absolutely delightful assist for Milinkovic's volley goal in training, which I know there were no defenders there, but it's still very nice.
Yeah, it's funny because he scored that goal when people were saying, his knee is injured, he will be out for, and he scored like that. Yeah, as I said, Falbo is very good in crossing. He's very good in both attacking and defending. Obviously, he's young, he hasn't got the experience, but he can be a nice add to the team, as he can be Raul Moro, who finally came back from Spain. As we said, he's an attacking winger, so he will have to learn to play in a different position. But again, coming in the last 20, 25 minutes, he can make a big difference. And we were saying this about Juventus, right? We said that Juventus have more option, etc. But if Juventus bring in Bernardeschi, that has been terrible, or Rabiot, then it's maybe better to try Raul Moro, that has talent and can maybe want to prove himself, than a player like Rabiot that it looks like he's playing to do a favor to someone.
Yeah, the Lukaku question I think is quite interesting as well, because you're right, it would be amazing to actually kind of see him back on the pitch in a way. And it's quite easy to forget that this season he did actually have that. I think it was Fiorentina when he came off the bench and made a great impact and got the assist. The thing that I think is going to be his main issue is just competition now, because now that Maricic is an option on the left, and once Lulic is fit again, and with Johnny, who Inzaghi has made a bit of a project of, and don't forget Johnny's done a similar thing in the Cagliari game, for example, coming off, I think he came off the bench in that game, did he, to give the assists for Caicedo's winner. And so he's done similar kind of thing, and he is seen as that impact wing-back, I suppose, who has excellent delivery, in a way probably even more so than Lukaku is. So I think that it tells you a lot about Lukaku's situation, that even now, with 5 substitutes allowed and injury problems and so on, I still find it quite hard to see how he's going to really get that much game time, unless there's injuries, of course. But
well, obviously, we said it a lot of time. We said, look at the Bundesliga. There are going to be a lot of small injuries, etc. Player not able to recover every 3 days. On the other side, let's not forget that, okay, Marusic can slide on the left side, but on the right side, then will Lazzari play every match? I don't think so. So, as soon as we're going to have enough players on the left side, I think Marusic is going to go back on the right side. So, So I think Lukaku, if he's fit, that's the biggest question. If he's fit, he's going to have some chances to play. Let's not forget that rumors are that Lulic could be not able to come back this season. So we don't know. This obviously would give more chances to Lukaku and Falbo to play a little bit. That's the biggest question mark for me about Lazio. And it was since the beginning of the season. Nothing changed. So we're going to see what happens. But again, if Lukaku is fit, which is still a big question mark, I think he's going to have his chance, especially now.
Just picking up on the point about Lulic, we did get a question from Arvid saying who should get the captaincy as vice Lulic. He's probably injured at the restart, and my man is Acerbi, he says. Now, the question is who should, not who will, because we know that the vice captains are, Immobile, Radu, Parolo. But would you, if you're going to pick someone to step in, would you rather have Acerbi or someone else in the team, Milinkovic?
Well, Danilo Cataldi or Sergej Milinkovic would be good. It would be great. I mean, Cataldi,
Cataldi, you need to play first.
Well, captain not play. But yeah, then Milinkovic-Savic would be an interesting option. After the video he made today that you still didn't see, I think he deserves it.
Yeah, and he's quite a popular option. I mean, I can't remember where I saw this, but I'm sure one of the fan sites put out a poll about this, kind of who should be the next captain, and of which he came out on top. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure he's necessarily the best kind of leader in that team, to be honest. But I think as a fan, he's one of the players you would enjoy most seeing in that role. I love when Shiro has the armband on as well, to be honest, but I'm still never really convinced about strikers as captains. I mean, to be honest, the actual role of a captain, we could debate anyway how important it is, but I mean, I suppose it is really more of a symbolic thing than anything else. But Acerbi as well, I mean, it's great, to be honest, that this can be a debate, so quite a big debate with this Lazio team, because you do have leaders and players you like to see captain the team throughout it, from Acerbi to Radu, Cataldi, Milinkovic, Parolo, Lulic, Immobile, Leiva. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of leaders in this team, a lot of people who have big connections with the club, and I think it shows fantastic depth in terms of experience and leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the secrets of the success of this team is because there's leaders like Radu, like Lulic, the same Marco Parolo. It's a leader even if he's not playing that much. Danilo Cataldi is, a fan playing for his club. Milinkovic-Savic, we're seeing Luis Alberto as well has now a much better positive mindset compared to last year. So I think this is one of the secret. The group is very merged together. I think something we saw on Juventus is they want to give the ball to Cristiano Ronaldo because they know if Cristiano Ronaldo doesn't score, he's not happy. Juventus can win, he doesn't care. On the same side, Rabiot is someone who thinks only about himself, etc. Instead, in Lazio, it's a group, and they all fight for the same goal, right? It's not important if Milinkovic-Savic score or Luis Alberto or Cataldi plays. The important thing is winning, and this is where you get results. So I think this is the important thing about the clubs. Then who is the captain it's not really important. There are silent leaderships in this team that hasn't got the hard man. That's not important. Sometimes you see that the most important player, the one that sells shirt, has the armband, but he's not the real leader, right? So I think that's not the important thing.
I never really expected that tonight's podcast would end up in such a kind of individual attack on Adrien Rabiot on your part. But quite enjoying it, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, one of the other questions we've got now that we're talking about these guys, because we're talking about Parolo, Cataldi, and Lulic in that group, and Sean McNeil asks us, what's the plan for the loanees whose agreements will expire at the end of the month? And, I've got this question wrong. I thought he was going to ask us about the guys with expiring contracts, but he's not. We can talk about that anyway. But Sean McNeil's question, anyway, is what's the plan for the loanees whose agreements expire at the end of the month, and what do you think the impact will be for the players returning to the squad, if any? So he's actually referring to the likes of Berisha and Dermisi.
Well, Iglitare said last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, that the only player coming back is Dermisi for Lazio, while the others will stay at the clubs. Now, as usual, Serie A didn't decide what to do with the contract because they're expiring the 30th of June. So, players like Ibrahimovic, what will they do on the 1st July? Think about clubs like Roma that has Mkhitaryan, Smalling, etc. Because their two biggest question is, if they don't extend the contract, what happened? Dermisi cannot play for Lazio, even if he comes back, because he has been put off of the list of 25 players, right? So even if he comes back with Lazio, he cannot play. He can play if they reopen the list, obviously. But what happened? Do they reopen it now, or do they reopen it on the 1st of July? And then what happens? Clubs like Juventus maybe sign 3 players on the 1st of July, and it's not really fair. But on the other side, teams like Roma that lose 2 players on loan like Mkhitaryan and Smalling, what happens? They play only with 33. So that's the biggest question mark. It's not getting the players back. Can they change the list of 25 players that can play? Because you can have 50 players back, but if the list is set and done, they can only train and never play.
Yeah, I mean, I expect, I know we kind of laughed about this last week, but I still kind of think that surely a decision has to be made on this quite soon. I mean, it's unbelievable that we're 2 weeks away from these contracts expiring. We still really know what's happening. But I mean, Dermisi's situation is a bit different, obviously, because he's been in Ligue 1, so their season has been declared over, so he's got no football to play anyway in France, whereas the likes of Berisha, he still is in the middle of a season with Dusseldorf at the moment. I mean, I can't really picture, I think it would be, to be honest, a fairly farcical situation if players start returning to their parent clubs and are allowed to play for them, because it completely alters the kind of the competition. I mean, it's if you think about teams like Chelsea, for example, who have like hundreds of players out on loan all the time. I know you have a squad list, you need to register a certain amount, you need to stick to certain rules, but if you're allowed to re-register and juggle who you've got available, you've got a certain player who's out injured, for example, you can take them off the list, then it does just change the competition somewhat. So my logical thinking is that they will manage to just simply extend the expiry of these contracts until the end of the current season, which is supposed to be August. But that should have been done ages ago. So I don't know.
Well, sorry. On Wednesday they will decide. So they should decide. They have this meeting in Lega Calcio to decide what to do with the contract. So we hope they're going to find a solution, because it's not easy. As I said, we know that Milan without Ibrahimovic is a different team. But what happened with the loan players between clubs, so it's complicated. And Bundesliga did the right choice to restart immediately so that the league will stop before the 30th of June. I don't know, it's going to be really complex, even because let's not forget that playing in July in Italy, it's not easy. It's very hot, even if you play at 9 o'clock in the night. So you need players.
Yeah, how about this? Ibrahim Obetti asked us, do you think our level will be the same? We have to start strong to end the season. If we have the same motivation, we can win. Let's do it. I mean, in terms of the question of, do you think our level will be the same? Do you reckon that, I know obviously, like you just said, playing in Italy in the summer is going to be hard. There's going to be a long time out, a lot of rustiness to shake off to begin with. But do you think that it is going to be possible for this team to get back to the same level it was playing at before, or is it simply too disruptive, the break that we've had?
So one thing important is, I believe we won't see the same football. It's going to be too hot to run for 95 minutes. The long break won't help, etc., etc. But I think the motivation is going to be the key. And again, the video you didn't see prove us that the team is very, very motivated. And this is a very important signal. If you go and watch Juventus of Friday, you will notice that the first 20, 25 minutes, Juventus was pressing really, really high, and then they didn't do it from that minute afterwards. Probably because they were tired. I don't know. I suppose that. But I think that pressing very high is going to be really, really complicated for 95 minutes. And my first thing is Atalanta. That's characteristic of that team. I don't think they're going to be able to do it for 95 minutes. Lazio is not that type of team that press really high, but they are a fast-paced team. So something is going to be different, but I think motivation is going to be the key. And I think probably watching Inter and Juventus, Lazio give me the impression, but we have to see when they play to be sure about that they are the most focused team at the moment. So that could be really important. But let's not think that it's going to be the same football as before, because it's not. It's not going to happen. Don't break.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've said this before, but one of the things that Lazio benefit from, in my opinion, is the fact that they don't play in one particular style. They're not a team that plays on the counter-attack. They're not a team that plays possession-heavy football. They're not a team that plays pressing football. They do a bit of everything, and they are capable of mixing it up. So the fact that this team can go long when they need to, and they choose their moments to, and they do it intelligently by using Milinkovic-Savic as a target, by getting players off him to win the nod-ons and so on. The fact that they are capable of keeping the ball when they need to tire out the opponents, that this is a really kind of versatile team in that manner. So I think that that's something that should play to their advantage. And there are other teams who are similar in that regard, I suppose, but it is something that I think, theoretically should help this team between now and the end of the season, is that they have different answers to different questions. They have done throughout this season. That's been a big strength of this team, is they've come up against all sorts of challenges and they've always found an answer to it. So this is yet again just a different question, a different puzzle for them to solve. But from what we've seen so far, there's no reason to really doubt that they'll be able to.
Yes, again, as we were saying at the beginning, the first matches will be key. Atalanta, Fiorentina, that will really tell us the condition of Lazio. and maybe we will even see Juventus and Inter playing again and see, if they have improved, if they're still at the same level. Let's not forget that, yes, they have one match more, so they're going to be a little bit more fit, but on the same side, they're going to get more tired. Maybe there's going to be rotation. And this brings me to the biggest question, Alistair, I have. Are we expecting Simone Inzaghi to do a massive turnover like against Atalanta? They're going to play the starting 11. Against Fiorentina, maybe we're going to see Adekanye start or something like that. Or do we think that he will keep the starting 11, but, maybe rotate a couple of players each match?
I think, to be honest, he's likely to try and do that as long as he can. I think it's unlikely we'll be able to get through from here to the end of the season by doing that. But Inzaghi, as we know, does like to kind of keep his favourite team in place as much as possible. I can't see him being in a position where he's going to be treating the second game every week as a kind of Europa League match where he gives opportunities to fringe players or youth players. I still think that he'll want his strongest team out there. But I think the way that this is going to affect players individually is going to massively vary. I mean, we don't know, we've talked before about Milinkovic-Savic, the fact that he's such a big guy that it's going to take him longer to get back into shape. I mean, we already saw that after the World Cup a couple of years ago when he didn't get a proper pre-season. He struggled from it afterwards. But then you get guys like Manuel Lazzari, who's pretty much the quickest and fittest guy on this entire team. He might be able to just keep going and going and going. So I think it's going to depend on each individual player, how much rest, how much rotation they're going to require. And that, to be honest, is going to really be a big difference between the coaches, is how to judge that. Who comes out on top, who does well in this series of games is going to be the teams with the coaches who can best judge when to drop who and when to rotate who and how to best manage the fitness of these players, because many of them will have never had to do this before. I mean, for us, yes, we're kind of used to it because we do have Europa League group games and so on, so you do get midweek games quite often. If you think about the teams further down the league, mid-table and relegation zone, apart from the odds Coppa Italia match or midweek Serie A round, they're not used to having to play games every 3 days. They're not used to the strains and the selection dilemmas that causes. So it's going to be a real talking point, I think, which coaches are best at doing that.
Yeah, and it's going to be curious because maybe we're going to see weaker team opting for a B team against, the top team because they say anyway they're going to lose, and maybe focus on the key matches, the one that are going to be decisive for the relegation. And this, knowing Italy, is going to create a massive talking point and discussion. So this could be a very big discussion. It would make sense in a point of view, Lecce making the starters relax against Juventus and not playing, and maybe playing against Spal makes sense for them, but it will, make the calendar or the fixture of Juventus easier, obviously.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That's a really good point. I mean, obviously, that's going to cause a lot of controversy, but then again, you can kind of see why teams would logically think about doing that. I guess with that logic, it would mean that teams will play a weak team against Lazio and a strong team against Roma, though, right?
Hope so. Who knows? One thing very important that we still didn't mention that happened after our podcast last week. We said it, right? We said it all the way along in this last month, with the thing that if one player found positive, all the team will have to be in
quarantine
for 2 weeks, 14 days. It's really impossible that Serie A will finish. But finally, they changed this rule, and only the single player now will go in quarantine if he's found positive. So the rest of the team will be able to play. This, Alistair, we can say that probably, we're not sure yet, but probably means that we will be able to finish Serie A as it is without playoff or algorithm, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, for me, this is forget about, the date of the restart or the playoffs or the algorithms or any of these announcements. This is, for me, the most important piece of news that we've actually had of all, to be honest, for this entire period of trying to get football restarted, because it wasn't going to be possible to finish the league realistically under those conditions. So yeah, it's massive. It's a really good news, and almost as a reminder what good news it was, I think it was Venezia today have had a player test positive. Yes, obviously not Serie A club, but it does go to show that these cases are still around. I mean, it's not, coronavirus hasn't disappeared in Italy, so it's still going to happen. In the Premier League, they've had cases. I think it was Norwich have had some. So they are still popping up around the place in football all the time. So yeah, I mean, let's really hope that there aren't any cases in Serie A at all. But at least this way, it does mean that they'll be able to continue matches, because the law the rule previously just wasn't consistent with the other regulations in Italy. So yeah, it makes more sense now.
Yeah, even because unfortunately in Lombardy the numbers have grown again in the last couple of days, so there's a little bit of concern there. So the risk of Atalanta, Milan, Inter players found positive have increased in the last days, but this probably make us believe that we're going to be able to finish the league. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of discussion. Imagine if Cristiano Ronaldo get the coronavirus. How people are going to complain. It's not fair. Juventus has a big disadvantage and so on. So obviously, this is something that can happen, and it's going to be a massive talking point. But I want to finish on this thing that makes me laugh, Alistair, because football is back, but five-a-side football is banned. It's not going to be back in Italy. Isn't
Not
it?
yet.
No, they already said that after the 25th of June, Calcio won't be allowed still. So what's the difference? It's two very similar sports, but one is played Calcio and five-a-side, no. This is Italy.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was actually playing tennis at a sports centre last week, where they also have football pitches, and so I was chatting to the guy about the situation, and he seemed completely baffled by this, because obviously these sports centres all around the city, all around the country are dependent on renting out these football pitches to really stay afloat. So yeah, it's a bit strange. I mean, obviously you can't avoid physical contact. You can't really tell people to not to play football and not come into contact with one another. But I mean, I do think it's just they're trying to do the right thing. I can't imagine it will go on for that long, I hope. I mean, we are looking at the phase 3 now coming in here, which means they're really starting to open up everything. I mean, it is more or less normal life already here, but now we've got cinemas and theatres reopening, and you're still not allowed big public gatherings, but these small public gatherings will be allowed. So yeah, it does seem a bit odd that we can't play five-a-side, because I was really wanting to as well.
Well, Alistair, let's wrap it up here so you finally can see the video of Milinkovic Savic, and then you tell me if you like it. And guys, thanks again for your support. Remember, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Rate us and review on iTunes. Alistair love to read your reviews, so please do it. Follow us on Spreaker, Spotify, and on our social channel. Thank you very much, and good night, Alistair.
Cheers.